Good evening. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education. It is Tuesday, August 16th, and we are meeting in a blended format with some of us here at Casco Bay High School and others joining via Zoom. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Bondo.
Présente.
Mr. Burke.
Here.
Ms. Lentz.
Here.
Ms. Grant. I'm sorry, Mr. Grant.
Still here.
Ms. Russell Better. I saw her on Zoom. I'm going to mark her here, even though I did not hear her. Ms. Biliou. Ms. Bryden.
Here.
Mr. Youssef.
Here.
Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Ms. Islami. Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Alzamili. Ms. Santiago. Ms. Diu.
Here.
And Chair Figdor.
Here. All right. Ms. Biliou is out of the country and unable to join us tonight. And with that, I want to invite you to join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants on the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or people of the Dawnland. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and classrooms. Okay, we are starting tonight with a short executive session. We'll resume the agenda for our business meeting 6:30 p.m. sharp. So first we have consideration and action to enter into an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D to discuss a personnel matter. Is there a motion? Mr. Youssef? Seconded by Ms. Bryden. All right.
Roll call.
Yes.
Ms. Bondo.
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Ms. Lentz.
Yes.
Mr. Grant.
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better.
Yes.
Ms. Bryden.
Yes.
Mr. Youssef.
Yes.
Ms. Ellis.
Yes.
Ms. Diu.
Yes.
And Chair Figdor.
Yes. So it's unanimous. We are entered into an executive session, and again, we will be back at 6:30 sharp. All right. Welcome back. We are going to resume our business meeting, and we're starting tonight, as is customary, with a public comment period. So tonight we'll take public comment on any issue that the school board is not voting on tonight. So with that, if anyone would like to, any members of the public would like to address the board, you can either come forward if you're here at Casco Bay High School, or use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you would like to address the board. See no hands up and no one coming to the podium here. I'm just going to give folks another few seconds. Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and we are going to move to the report of the chair. And tonight I have really brief remarks. I basically just want to welcome everyone to the 2022-2023 school year. I want to welcome our new staff, all of our families. We know we have a lot of work to do as a district. I'm also incredibly optimistic about the school year. I think this school year is going to be, after 2.5 years of school and COVID, I think that we are finally going to get to, I'm optimistic, a much more normal school year. And I know it's going to take all of us together to ensure that our students and staff have the best year possible. So I look forward to working with you all to achieve that. And I just want to really welcome everyone. Today as a parent, I got the parent letter from King, where my younger daughter is starting middle school, letting us know what house she's in. So I know that those letters are arriving, and the excitement that comes with the new school year is happening right now and will only grow. So welcome everyone to the new school year, and I really look forward to working jointly with all of you to make the year as successful as possible. So that's all I have for my remarks tonight, and we're going to move to the remarks of the superintendent. Superintendent Patana.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, Portland has been recognized as an All-American City by the National Civic League's Campaign for Grade Level Reading. This award, which recognizes the work happening under our ConnectEd partnership, specifically the growing partnership between PPS and Portland Housing, the Portland Housing Authority, was scheduled for tomorrow morning with an event hosted by Mayor Kate Snyder at the Riverton Park Community Center. Unfortunately, it's now being rescheduled to sometime next week, so I will let you know, board members, I'll let you know about the date, and we will obviously post that on our website as well. As you may have heard, the CDC has formalized recommendations for this coming school year, and those recommendations prioritize keeping students in school by reducing the need to quarantine when exposed to someone with COVID and de-emphasizing other interventions such as screening testing. The guidance speaks to returning to some of the precautions in times of high community transmission and outbreaks. We will be working with our medical team. I know that Assistant Superintendent Townsend and our head nurse, Tina Valiu, met yesterday. We will continue to do that work to review and adapt our guidance to reflect those recommendations. It's also our understanding that the Maine Department of Education will be issuing its guidelines sometime later this week. We are hosting a monkeypox vaccine clinic with the Maine CDC and City Department of Health next Saturday at East End Community School, so this coming Saturday. This important opportunity for addressing a new public health challenge highlights the value of the growing partnership and collaboration between our district and the public health community. The City Council set a September 1st hearing on the Charter Commission recommendations, including the school budget governance recommendation. This is a step towards placing these recommendations on the November ballot. We will be offering testimony at the hearing in support of advancing the proposed governance change to voters. This proposal, as you know, is grounded in recommendations made by the board at the start of the Charter Commission process. As you heard from Chair Figdor, this will be our final meeting before the start of the 22-23 school year. Over the coming weeks, we will welcome new staff, hold our summer institute, and then welcome students in grades 1 through 12 on Tuesday, September 6th, with kindergarten trailing by a couple of days. Pre-K and kindergarten will trail by a couple of days. September 6th is also the next board meeting date. So at that time, we will have up-to-date update on the opening of school. I would like to thank our Human Resources team led by Executive Director of Human Resources, Barb Stoddard, for their tireless work to help us get to full staffing over the next 3 weeks. We continue to fill open positions, and tonight you will be asked to approve a significant number of new hires, including assistant principals for Ocean Avenue and Lyseth schools, which you will meet shortly. We are concerned about some openings, particularly special education positions and especially educational technician positions in special education. There has been significant media coverage of school district hiring challenges over the past couple of weeks, both nationally and locally. There's no question that the Great Resignation, as it's been called in the media, is definitely having an impact on our schools, as well as those schools, as well as other schools across the region and country. All the more reason to highlight the efforts of our HR team, as well as our hiring managers at the school and department level. At the last board meeting, I mentioned that our work on the redesign of the district website was progressing. Tonight, Executive Director for Communications and Community Partnerships, Dr. Grace Valenzuela, will be previewing the website and talking briefly about our rollout timeline. With her virtually is our website coordinator, Feng Ni, who is by far the coolest person under pressure that I know, because she's unflappable. But Grace is pretty close to that. So Grace, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I know everyone is excited to see what our new website is going to look like. And before we do that, I just want to point out the elements that we wanted the new online presence of Portland Public Schools. So first, we wanted the message of Portland Promise to be prominently displayed and with intention throughout the new site. We wanted it woven into the homepage experience more purposefully. Instead of currently what we have is a link of to an external site. And we wanted the site to be outcomes driven, to showcase who we are as a district, the quality of the work that we do for students, staff, and family in the larger community of Portland, and to use testimonials from our incredible alumni. We want to use it effectively as a platform for communication. Hence, it has to be ADA accessible to reach broader audience. It has the ability to automatically translate in major languages spoken at home by our families. And we invested in the highest quality translation services we could find, much higher fidelity rate in translation quality than commonly used platforms. It also has the ability to integrate dynamic content. And for quick notices, we want the site to feed news stories, events, and with the calendars tied to our current calendar system. So for the end user, we want it to be intuitive and easily navigable on any device, particularly on your phone. And to keep it current, we also want a platform that is easy to manage and update on the back end. Most importantly, we aim for a website that is visually driven and interesting. We want our audience to linger and have a quality experience when visiting our site. So these were the major considerations that we use in developing the website, and we can take a look to see if we met our expectations of ourselves. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our incredible website coordinator, Feng Wei, who took on the major role of building the website from scratch. She also acted as a conduit to Final Site, the vendor that we chose to help us design the website. And so without further ado, Feng.
Thank you, Grace.
Yes.
Again, my name is Fong Wee. I'm the website coordinator that's been helping on this project, but I am just one of many who has been working on this project. I'm excited to share with you the new website design and to walk you through the many features that we put a lot of thought into. So let me share my screen here.
Drum roll, drum roll, drum roll.
Okay. Here we are.
I love it.
So here we are on the homepage of the district site. You'll see at the very top, we have our Portland Public School logo. And one of the things that we really wanted to think about was the user who will be using our website. We wanted, as Grace said, to be very easy to navigate, to find items or pages or information that someone might be looking for. So we worked with Final Site to create two forms of navigation on this homepage. We have this top bar here, which we call the utility bar. It is access for what we believe would be the top users for our website. We have students, we have families, and then we have our community who may be looking for information for the board. So the first item is our schools. We have our schools incredibly accessible here. We also have links that we believe students would want to find. We worked with many departments within the district as well as program directors to kind of come up with this list of links that would be useful to students. We also have links for families. as well as board information. And we also have links for staff. And these are links that we're currently still building. And we also have a drop down for the most common languages currently in our district. We have the ability to add up to 100 languages, but for now we have these. And we also have this search icon here, where you can find items that might be kind of buried in our site. We looked at our Google Analytics for our current website to come up with these 10 icons that are present on the search. These are based on our Google Analytics. These are the top 10 pages that our website visitors currently are looking for. So it's information on enrollment, for example, or calendar. So we wanted it to be very accessible and easy to find. When you click on the enroll button, for example, it will take you to an interior page. You'll still have these navigation headers at the top. And we have this beautiful photo for the header. And then we also have this interior navigation to show you where this page lives. So if you're on the home page, you would go to departments and you would hover and you would find enrollment. While we don't have an enrollment department within Portland Public Schools, we did a little bit of research on how other schools structured their navigation, and many school districts had placed enrollment under department. So we believe that was the best place for this page for now. But you can see each page is structured very similarly. We have a little body here with a little bit of a call out. We have a interior navigation for this particular department or page. We have buttons to help direct our website visitors to the right and correct information. We also put information in accordions to help keep the page more succinct, as well as help our visitors or audience find information quicker. So instead of having to scroll forever to find information, we tuck them into accordions to help find information easier. And it's also more beneficial for mobile devices as well. So going back to the home page here. So below the utility bar, we also have our main navigation. And I'd like to show you this in a little bit, but below that, we have our scrolling banner, which with our most recent news. So we have these feature items for now. We also have the ability to play a video if we wanted to on this front header. And then below that, we have our icon menu, which are the same as the ones in the search. So if the families or visitors or students are not looking for that information in the search, it's right there under the header. For example, meals is a very common page based on our Google Analytics. And this is another example of how our interior page is structured. We have this beautiful picture at the top, body, a little interior navigation for this particular department, some call outs. Yeah. And then coming back below this icon menu, we have our Portland Promise graphic. It's a very interactive, engaging graphic. If you hover over any of the Portland Promise goals, this animation happens and you have the option to click and learn more. And it has this wonderful quote here. If you click on read more, it should take you, there you go, to our Portland Promise page. So this is our achievement goal. It has quotes and this beautiful write-up about a alumni. Going back, we also have a learn more button if you would like to learn more about the Portland Promise. This is a Portland Promise overview page where you can also find that same information. So if you were to click on equity, let's see here. And then below the Portland Promise page or graphic, we have the district news and calendar section. If you hover over any of these boxes, the image changes in the background. There's Adam. And this button here takes you to our news and calendar page. So here is the latest district news. We have upcoming events on the side here, and you have the option to load more. We also have an option to view the district calendar, to download, to view the board. So following this page here, this button here, this is our district calendar. You'll see there's more items in September. So one of the things that Grace had mentioned and that we had considered when working to design the site is keeping the website as up to date and requiring as low maintenance as possible. And one of the ways that we've done that is, or try to achieve that, is by linking our live calendar on the website to a Google Calendar. So that way, when we update a Google Calendar, it'll be updated on the site. We also wanted to make it very easy for our website visitors to find items. So we kind of put buttons in places and they're kind of bold and colorful to attract your attention. So if you wanted to download the district calendar, there's an option for here. And then we also have the board calendar. And this is an example of the Board of Education calendar. And this is also linked to the Board of Ed Google Calendar with all the different meetings coming up. We also have this interior navigation to help link to the rest of the board info and upcoming events.
Apparently not.
So coming back to the home page below the district news and calendar, we also have a testimonial section. And here we've chosen to highlight alumni that graduated from our schools. So scrolling through, there's these quotes and photos of our students. And then below here, we have our fast facts about our district. So hovering over one of these boxes, you learn a little bit more about our site, or I mean, our district. If you click on read more on any of the boxes, it'll take us to our fast fact page. And here we've incorporated some wonderful photos and graphics to highlight the different information about our school or our district. Toggle some information here. So coming back to the home page, I wanted to show you also quickly what this main navigation, what the items under each navigation is. So under about, we have some of these links here. Board of Education, I would love to show you that page. There's a beautiful picture of Portland. And we have a little bit about what the Board of Education does. Colorful and bold buttons to direct our visitors to board docs, to see our meeting recordings. We also have this interior navigation here. So for board members, here we built this page that has the different district. And we've organized this page by district. And then at the bottom, we have the at-large members organized alphabetically by last name. We also have our student rep at the bottom. So we have our board committees listed, bios, as well as contact for each member. We also have migrated all of the board policies from board docs onto the website. Here, this is the table of contents for the board policies. These items currently live on the site. They were copied over from board docs. And the reason why we wanted to have these policies living on the actual site is for translation purposes. The site is amazing with translation. Let me show you. So you can search for any policy with this search here. So if I wanted to read about equity, these are all the policies that contain that keyword. If I click on equity policy, it'll take me to the actual policy itself. And if I would prefer to read it in a different language, let's say Spanish, the site immediately translates it. So it makes it very accessible to everyone. We also have this side here, navigation for additional policies that someone may want to read, and it has that same search. So we structure that the same with board resolutions and state of schools report. It's structured the same way. And we also tuck the board calendar as here as well. So there's two ways to access some of the pages, and the idea is that we want it to be to make sense where someone might want to find this information. So we have it under news and calendars, but you may also find it under board. You may also find it under about and board of education. So that was an example of one of our about pages. We also have our academic programs. We're really excited about these items here.
So Fong, you want to, could you quickly show the school page?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So modeling after our district page, we have the Deering High School, or all our school pages are designed based off of the district website. So you can see here, we have this same kind of two forms of navigation. We have this scrolling banner. Here we have a drone video of Deering. And if I click on this button, it shows you the first day of school. We worked with the schools to have them select the 10 items or the 10 top pages they believe their website visitors would want to see. And below there we have, which is slightly different from the district website, which has the Portland Promise, we have school calendar front and center on the school website homepage. And then below that, we have school news. And then we have testimonials, which also scrolls. And I want to show you quickly under about, there's the school profile. For high schools, we have school profile page. And then another page, would be course catalog. And kind of modeling after that page that I showed you with the board policies, we have course catalogs organized in the same manner. And click on it. We have our content here that will also be translated by the top bar here. Under student life, we have athletics and clubs and activities. This is an example of a athletics page. We have a button here that links externally to, I think each school or high school within the state of Maine has an athletic page like this. So we linked there, but we also organize the content here. So we have schedule, scores, and rosters, and the name of each head coach. And if you click on it, it will give you links to the schedule for that particular sport. And we also have a news and calendars page as well. This is all during high school content.
Thank you, Fong. I think that we have a sense of what it would, the site would look like. So
Timeline.
intention is to go live before school starts. Yeah. So that's the goal. So, and I just want to make sure that I thank everybody, the school leaders, the department heads for sending us their content, and also my team. I just want to give them a big shout out. They edit to help put together copy for the website, to edit, review, critique, take pictures, harass people to send us their content. So thank you to Nanette Dar-Blake, to Maureen Clancy, Emily Crocker, Tess Nasalewicz, Lan Pham, and Nyla Louisa. So I think those are the people who incredibly put a lot of time on this work. So still in progress. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you and the team because this is a tremendous amount of work, and I know how hard you guys have worked on it. So I'm super excited to get it up and running. I keep asking you, when is it going live? When is it going live? I didn't even know that I was on the front page. Now I absolutely want it to go live.
Thank you so much.
Can I just say briefly, I hadn't seen it at all before right now, and it's awesome. I mean, just from what I've seen, it just seems like it's going to be such a tool for everyone, for students, for families, for staff, for board members. I'm definitely going to use the website and not board docs for a lot of things.
And I really think the important piece here is it will help us a lot in communication, drive the audience there because it is translated.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful for us.
Again, it just looks incredible and awesome and so thoughtful in terms of the navigation and how it's organized. So thank you so much to everyone who was involved.
And that concludes my report. And then we'd love to move straight into the personnel items.
Yeah, so I wanted to see if we...
I have a quick question.
Yes, Ms. Bando, go ahead, please.
Yeah, for the CDC guideline you just mentioned about, no. For the CDC guidelines, I think I heard the nurse and assistant principal they met yesterday. Do we have any timeline when the guideline will be available, or is going to be before the school start?
Well, I mean, the guidelines from CDC are available.
Yes.
And the State Department of Education is putting out its guidelines. We are working on that ahead of the school year. So
Okay.
we will, and I just want to be very clear that there are very, very few guidelines.
Okay.
So I think that that's the thing that I want to stress
Okay.
is that, the CDC guidelines, our state guidelines are going to be basically focus on keeping kids in school.
Okay.
And so, we're going to be, significantly pared back from what we've had in the past. So.
Okay. I just want to make sure then, is all our population and all the multilingual families too, they are really aware about, even though it's going to be less stress, but we just need to make sure they're all well translated and well communicate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. As the superintendent started to allude to, we would like to move up the personnel items. So we don't have staff having to wait for the entire length of our meeting, which is going to be lengthy again. So is there any board member that objects to moving up the personnel items? Okay, I see a general nods of heads that that's fine. So we're going to go right into personnel items and then we'll resume with the rest of the agenda as posted. So first is consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, contract administrators. Is there a motion? Ms. Lentz, seconded by Ms. Bondo. Mr. Batana, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Chair. Today, I'm pleased to introduce two dedicated Portland Public Schools educators who are stepping into assistant principal roles. Talia Edlund as the new assistant principal at Lyseth Elementary School, and Emily Parr, a special education teacher at Ocean Avenue Elementary School for the past 8 years as the new assistant principal at Ocean Avenue. Let me share some highlights about each of them. Talia Edlund has been an educator for more than 22 years. She grew up in Chicago and graduated from the University of Michigan and began her teaching career with the New York City Teaching Fellows in Brooklyn, New York, before moving to Maine, where Talia taught 2nd and 3rd grade at Pond Cove School in Cape Elizabeth, and then 5th grade at Talbot Community School. Talia transitioned to a role as math coach, a position she held at Lyseth this past school year. In 2016, Talia was named Maine's Teacher of the Year, and she has served on Educate Maine's Board of Directors and is a trustee with the Portland Symphony Orchestra, where she co-chairs the Diversity and Equity Committee. Talia is trilingual in Spanish and Ukrainian, in addition to English, and lives in Cape Elizabeth with her husband and children and a giant sheepdog. Emily Parr. Emily has worked in education for over 20 years at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. She is passionate about forming deep, meaningful relationships with students and families, and she's excited to continue to contribute to our rich, diverse Portland community in her new role as assistant principal. Emily has been with the Portland Public Schools since 2014 as a special education teacher at Ocean Avenue Elementary School, where she also served as a special education liaison. Prior to that, Emily taught multiple subjects in a variety of settings, ranging from a private therapeutic day treatment program in South Portland to a large urban high school in the UK. She holds a BA in History and Politics and a postgraduate certificate of education from the United Kingdom's University of Newcastle upon Tyne, and is currently completing a master's in educational leadership from the University of Southern Maine. Outside of education, Emily also managed a legal aid unit for a major nonprofit in Manchester, England. She lives in Portland with her husband and 3 sons. Her 2 younger children are current PPS students, and her eldest son is a recent Casco Bay High School graduate. Both these educators are exemplary leaders already who've already forged connections to the schools that they will now help lead after you take action. This will provide continuity and enhance their ability to work with students, staff, and families. They're excited to take on their new roles, and we're looking forward to having them join our administrative team. Their knowledge, skills, experience, and dedication will ensure that Lyseth and Ocean Avenue students have an optimal learning experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there is no public comment on personnel items, so we'll move right into board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Board Member Burke, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'll just say I'm very excited. These sound like excellent educators, and I'm grateful that they'll be a continued part of our school community. Thank
you, Board Member Burke. I'll just add congratulations and welcome to this new role. It's exciting to hear about your service to the schools already, and that you'll be continuing in a new role. So I'm excited to vote in favor of these positions. So with that, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support the motion. Personnel items, election of administrators. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair, Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Ms. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Ms. Diu,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes, you missed one of our students, Mr.
I'm sorry, Ms. Azamili.
Yes.
Apologies.
Excellent. So the motion passes unanimously with our students voting with the majority.
So I would love to, I know Emily is here and I believe Talia is virtual. So Emily, I don't know if you would like to say any words to the board. And she's joined by Dr. Stevens, the principal.
Just to say, I'm very excited about this opportunity and, to be in a community that I love in this new role. And I look forward to moving the ship forward with, as we move into a different phase with bringing together our community post COVID restrictions in particular.
I just wanted to say I'm really grateful for Emily to step up into this role. It's going to be great. We've known Emily for 10 years when her kids first came to Ocean Ave. And then 8 years ago, she stepped into the teaching role there. And from the very start, she was a leader. She was a leader in our school. She was always helping us reach our goals. And she was continuous improvement is the name of our game at our school. And Emily just really steps into that role. In addition, she's been a leader at the district level and her work has been really appreciated. So she's going to be great. So thank you.
Thank you. Great. And is Talia with us?
Yes, I am. I'm right here. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm so honored and humbled to be among some of the incredible administrators and educators here in Portland. I really believe, I say this all the time and I mean it wholeheartedly. I believe the staff and students in Portland are the absolute best in the world. And I'm just so excited to continue my career here in Portland. And just as an aside, beside my family, including my sheepdog, teaching and learning really are the great joys of my life. And I'm excited to see what comes our way this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. And I saw that Sarah is there and she went on camera. So I think that Principal Goodall also wants to say something.
My Tuesday night with two children as my husband presents. So apologies if we get interrupted. But I'm so thrilled to have Talia. She's done incredible work at LISAP as a math coach. And I also feel that as a new principal in Portland Public Schools, new to LISAP community, she's just proven invaluable in providing context and knowledge. And it was really amazing. We had over 50 families join us this morning for Meet the Assistant Principal and Meet the Principal, multiple languages. And to see kids run up and hug Talia and say, "You're going to be our assistant principal," was incredibly meaningful. So I am confident that this is going to be a dynamic team and we're really excited for what's going to come at LISAP.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, we thank you so much. We are on to the next motion, consideration and action to approve personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, 1 year only. Is there a motion? Mr. Grant, seconded by Ms. Lentz. Ms. Stoddard, will you speak to the motion?
Good evening, everyone. This is a slate of 8 one-year-only candidates. And just for the new folks on the board, just a reminder that you'll see one-year-only hires sort of throughout the year. These can be covering leaves of absences. It could be based on the funding that's on a one-year-only basis. And sometimes for late hires, we might have a very limited pool, which we would hire for 1 year only. So then we would repost in the spring during the regular hiring season.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. Are there questions on the motion? Seeing none and that there's no public comment on personnel items, we're going to move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Board Member Burke, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this slate of teachers. I see all the garden teachers here and Mandarin teacher, school counselor, special educator role, all things that we spend a lot of time working on as a board and bringing forward to make possible for the school year. So, yay.
Okay, I'll echo Board Member Burke's comments and we'll go right into a vote. So unless there's further discussion. Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support the motion. Mr. Superintendent. And again, the motion, is election of teacher candidates 1 year only.
Chair, Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Ms. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili,
Yes.
Ms. Diu,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with our students voting with the majority. Next, we're on to consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, probationary. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, seconded by Mr. Youssef. Ms. Stoddard, will you speak to the motion?
Sure. This is a slate of 16 educators. They're all just the traditional first-year probationary hires.
Okay, excellent. Are there any questions about this slate of probationary candidates? Seeing none and that there's no public comment on personnel items, we're going to move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Ms. Bondo.
Just a comment. So, yeah, I am so thrilled because when I look at the slide that we have here, I see social workers and I see what we really need to work on the social emotion for our students, especially on the returning of school. So I'm so in favor to cast my vote for that slide. This is really amazing and for the special education as well. So I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. Is there any other board discussion? Seeing none, Bob, roll call vote, please indicate whether you support action to approve the personnel items listed, election of teacher candidates, probationary. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair, Ms. Bondo,
Yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Ms. Lentz,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Bryden,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili,
Yes.
Ms. Diu,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. And last, for personnel items, we're on to consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed, election of first continuing contract teachers. Is there a motion? Ms. Lentz, seconded by Ms. Bryden. Thank you, Sarah. Ms. Stoddard, will you speak to this motion?
Sure. This educator, similar to the one you approved at the last meeting, has served in a 1 year only capacity for 2 years. So the rehire of this person is now going to be as a continuing contract educator.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Ms. Stoddard. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none and that there's no public comment on personnel items, we're going to move right to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? Board Member Burke, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm glad to see Ms. Grafias will still be with us. I knew outdoor art wasn't destined for the longevity, but it was an amazing offering in last year or so. And he's a talented educator, so glad he's still with us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Board Member Burke. Ms. Bryden.
I have a comment generally on all of the four personnel items. I wanted to say how much I appreciate the demographic data breakdown that you provided at Board Member Biliou's request. Thank you. And just across the board, I would find, so I think that Board Member Biliou brought up a really good point at the last meeting, requesting that information. And I'm realizing that it would be helpful for me in the future, not for like this round, but in the future to have a breakdown of what those numbers mean when it comes to who is in leadership. So administrators and other forms of leadership versus all staff. And then also the same demographic information around the applicant pool would be helpful. So, but that doesn't impact how I'm going to vote on that. Thank you.
Excellent. And for the public, thank you, Ms. Bryden. For the public, I'll just draw your attention to in board docs, there is a summary of the demographic profiles of our, specifically with regards to race, of our recent hires in terms of administrators and staff that are in teaching roles. Okay, by seeing no other board discussion, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support this final personnel motion, which is election of first continuing contract teacher. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Lentz?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes. Yes. Well.
Mr. Alzamili?
Yes.
Ms. Diu?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for moving the personnel items up. Now we're going to resume our agenda as it was noticed. And that brings us to the report of the secretary. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of June 21st, 2022. Is there a motion? Ms. Bryden, seconded by Ms. Lentz. Are there any questions on the motion? So this is on our meeting minutes from our June 21st meeting. Seeing none, I'm going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment? So this is specifically on our meeting minutes from our June 21st, 2022 meeting. If you do have public comment, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or come up to the podium here at Casco Bay High School. Okay, I don't see any public comment, so I'm going to go close public comment and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on the meeting minutes? Ms. Lentz?
Yeah, just that my name is spelled incorrectly. The Z instead of an S, please.
I apologize for that, Ms. Lentz. We will make those corrections. I'm going to consider that a friendly amendment. Okay, is there any other board discussion? Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support approving the meeting minutes of June 21st, 2021. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Abstain.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Lentz?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili?
Yes.
Ms. Diu?
Yes.
And Chair Figdor.
Yes. So the motion passes with 7 board members in the affirmative, 1 abstention, and our students voting with the majority. And next we're on to consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of August 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, seconded by Ms. Lentz. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, we're going to move to public comment. Is there any public comment on our meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was August 2nd, 2022? If so, you can either come forward or use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm going to close public comment and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on our meeting minutes from our August 2nd meeting? Yes, Ms. Diu.
My name was spelled wrong.
Okay, sorry about that, Ms. Diu. We will make that correction as well, and I apologize for these spelling errors. Okay, if there isn't any more board discussion, we're going to move to a roll call vote. By roll call vote, please indicate whether you approve the meeting minutes of our August 2nd, 2022 meeting. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Lentz?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili?
Yes.
Ms. Diu,
Abstain.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with 2 students voting with the majority and 1 abstention. All right, so thank you for bearing with us through all those motions. Now we are on to our board focus on educational issues, and tonight we have an update on harassment, sexual harassment, and discrimination, specifically on our policy ACA. Mr. Superintendent, are you introducing this?
I am.
Okay, please take it away. Thank you.
So tonight's board focus is part of our continuing series of data deep dives designed to serve as a foundation to understanding where we stand as a school district as we enter the 2022-2023 school year. We have been highlighting data tied to key policy initiatives that the board has undertaken in the past couple of years in particular. At the last meeting, we discussed the status of school discipline in PPS after the board made significant changes in policies designed to reduce disparities in student suspension and discipline rates. Tonight, we continue that work. Tonight's presentation is around the implementation of a sexual harassment and discrimination policy ACAA. This policy was updated in the spring of 2020, partly in response to former students, and consent education advocates who came to speak to the board about their experiences attending PPS or working with affected students. This policy is a seminal piece of equity work that makes it clear that we do not condone any form of harassment or discrimination against our students. Tonight, Assistant Superintendent for School Management, Erin Townsend, along with Executive Director for Data and Technology, Dr. Gavin Goodall, will talk about the implementation of the policy from a data and practice perspective. So, Erin?
Great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Superintendent Batana. It's really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening for our first ever kind of inaugural board update regarding the implementation of this policy and the data around instances of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment experienced by our students. Before we get into the content of tonight's presentation, I would like to recognize a few colleagues and partners who have been instrumental in initiating this work. So first, internally, in addition to Dr. Goodall, I would like to recognize Barrett Wilkinson, Richard Moore, and our former ombudsperson, Kate Brogan, in addition to our secondary school administrators and our school level liaisons, who have all been instrumental in the initial implementation of this policy. I also want to recognize a few of the community partners that the superintendent referenced there, specifically SARSM, Through These Doors, and the organization Boys to Men, who have all provided outstanding partnership support and technical expertise in both the development of the policy and some of the early stages of this implementation. So their collaboration has helped us accomplish the work you see represented this evening. So for this presentation this evening, we're going to provide some context for the data that you will see by first providing a high-level overview of the policy itself, as well as of our initial implementation activities to support its rollout. The bulk of the presentation will then cover the summary of the overall data recorded over this past year, as well as that related to our complaints and the use of the anonymous reporting form. We'll conclude with our reflections on the data and work to date that is informing our next steps in deepening this work this coming year. As the superintendent referenced, and as you may recall, we undertook a significant revision of this policy in response to student and community voice on the issue that surfaced in the fall of 2019. We worked with a group of community partners, a number of whom I just mentioned, in addition to others, and student leaders throughout 2020, despite the shutdown and pandemic, by looking at national models, responding to updated Title IX guidance, and reflecting the best practice that the practitioners that were a part of our group had to offer. This led to the passage of the revised policy in the fall of 2020, and we have since begun the implementation of this step, of this work since that time. The goal of the policy is to ensure that all students have the right to attend school free from harassment, discrimination, or sexual harassment. In the policy, we articulated our commitments to improve prevention and education, to more effectively handling reported cases, and to work to repair harm suffered by our victims and community overall when these incidents occur. To accomplish these goals, the policy and its related procedure, ACAAR, include a few key elements. In terms of prevention and notification, we've committed to increasing our education and awareness raising around these issues with the goal that all students and families know that they deserve to feel and be safe in school and know how to access support resources from community partners, find a supportive adult to disclose to in their schools, and access the Title IX process if appropriate. We also committed to ensuring that all staff clearly know their responsibilities as mandated reporters around these issues and how to inform and share these instances and how to reach our Title IX coordinator. In terms of reporting and complaint procedures, the policy includes a number of elements to make reporting easier to access for students, families, and staff through the establishment of the school level liaisons, a group of educators at our secondary schools that I'll speak more about, the use of our anonymous reporting system, and making the role of the district Title IX coordinator more visible. The procedure has significant detail related to the processes by which complaints should be handled, the timelines associated with handling formal complaints, and the processes for appeals. Finally, there are certain commitments related to maintaining records of these incidents and to establishing systems to be able to provide annual reports related to incidents of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment, and to be able to track this data over time to monitor our progress and improvement. It as well enshrines a commitment for an annual report to the board, of which what brings us here this evening for this first ever annual report. To ground us again, kind of in the core aspect of the policy, want to briefly review the relevant definitions of the key terms that we'll be discussing this evening. The definitions are included in both the policy and procedure that we've adopted. Within the context of this policy, we attempted to define discrimination as that which is reflective of a more systematic experience in terms of preventing an individual's access to to school systems and to the experience of school. So, for example, disproportionate suspension would be an example of kind of discrimination. So we consider discrimination at a more systematic level, and harassment is attempted to be defined as more of an individual experience of what a student or a student in this case may have experienced in terms of language, treatment based on membership in a protected class. Again, as you'll see in our data shortly, while these distinctions made sense in a conceptual sense, when you get into the nitty-gritty of individual instances, part of what we've learned is the challenge of kind of classifying things in multiple ways, and as part of our ongoing work to improve our data tracking and quality as it relates to this work. The protected classes, again, that I think people are familiar with, but are established on the basis of both federal and state law, include these 5. So harassment, or discrimination would be, an incident would be considered harassment or discrimination if it was based on membership as somebody who has a disability, if it was based on sex or gender, race, color, or national origin, sexual orientation, and religion. If a student is experiencing inappropriate treatment, but is not based on one of these protected classes, that is often related to bullying. And so that's relevant here because we'll be talking about that harassment and bullying, have somewhat similar definitions, but the distinction for harassment is that it's on the basis that the treatment they're experiencing is on the basis of one of these protected classes. Finally, the last definition is for sexual harassment. The definition in our policy encompasses the definitions established through federal Title IX regulations, Maine regulations, and our own local board policy. Broadly speaking, these definitions encompass unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. These distinctions in terms of policies and definitions, though, are important because there are specific procedures associated with the handling of complaints that meet the criteria of a Title IX sexual harassment complaint. Finally, in terms of context, before we begin the data, I want to speak a little bit of some of our implementation activities that we've undertaken over the past 18 months as we launched the rollout of this policy. Excuse me. So since, no, I apologize. So the first is we developed the job description and established our initial cohort of school level liaisons. So we have established a role within the schools for which people and have trained them around Title IX procedures in the harassment and discrimination policy, such that there's some known adult within the school communities that students or staff can go to make reports about instances of harassment and discrimination or sexual harassment. We heard clearly from students that they didn't know who to go to, that just the district Title IX person who was somebody outside of their school of which they had no context or relationship was not an effective means for them to come forward to report potentially traumatic events that they may have experienced. So we have had 2 liaisons at both of the 2 large high schools at Deering and Portland, and an individual liaison at Casco Bay and at each of the 3 middle schools. So we have generally had people in those positions all along. They meet, after our initial training, we hold monthly meetings to be able to continue to collaborate and problem solve together in these roles. We also developed and launched in partnership with some of our community partners, the Students Speak Up website that, in addition to housing our anonymous reporting form that's available in multiple languages, also houses the policy and procedure, also translated, and access and information about both community-based resources as well as the school-based resources that students can access to provide to access support. We also conducted a multi-hour secondary administrator training in the spring of 2021 with all of our administrators at that time around the new policy, the obligations, and kind of the reporting and investigation processes associated with the new policy. Following that, the administrators and the liaisons in collaboration have done rollout and initial training for all staff at our secondary schools. So there was initial trainings again in the spring of 2020, and a number of schools had additional quote unquote refresher trainings this past fall as we returned to school. Additionally, we have partnered with Boys to Men, who has had a generous Department of Justice grant to do work specifically in the co-curricular space to provide training multiple times. We've had multiple opportunities, and again, continuing that work this fall to be able to provide training to our co-curricular coaches and advisors to after-school clubs. It's an area where, particularly, unfortunately, in the realm of athletics, we've, there historically have been a number of issues there. So that training and community building has been important. In addition, as it relates to some of our commitments around prevention and education, specifically as it relates to the development of our consent education curriculum, some of our community partners from SARSM and Through These Doors have joined the health vertical team over this past year, participating in the development of that work and the development of our K through 12 health education curriculum, including that consent education piece. So they've been valuable partners in rolling out that work. We had an initial parent university event to bring awareness to the new policy and to help inform the community more broadly about both the establishment of the policy as well as to how to access the resources and to make reports. So that was held in January of 2022, at the beginning of this year. And lastly, we have begun efforts around partnering with student engagement. And as we'll talk about, this is an area of focus as we come in to this coming year to continue to deepen, to ensure all of the policy, our commitments within it, and the resources and opportunity to report are well known amongst all students within our secondary school communities. Before I transition, I just want to acknowledge so that this part of, the presentation was context for the data we'll share in the next section of our presentation. We're going to look first at the total data that was collected regarding incidents of harassment, discrimination, or sexual harassment by our school administrators, through our student information system, Infinite Campus. The data in IC, as it's called, are generally student-to-student interactions that are handled usually at the school or have been handled usually at the school level. These data, this data tends to be reported at the offender level. So generally the data that we've pulled is when there's been a finding of an offender, in part, and there's documentation in the board packet about the guidance and the procedures around documenting this data in Infinite Campus. But it's centered around that in terms of when there was a finding of harassment, discrimination, or an allegation. It isn't always a finding that's substantiated, but as you'll see in the data, we also are required to record allegations of harassment, bullying, sexual harassment. But it's centered, the reporting is initially centered around the offender. This is a distinction, from the data that we'll look at from the anonymous reporting form and from the complaints and the resulting investigations as it relates to those, where that data includes both student-to-student interactions, but also may include adult student interactions, complaints students may have made about their interactions with adults. And that data is generally centered from the victim perspective. So we'll talk about that more and happy to discuss, but just wanted to make, some of those kind of clarifications as we begin to work through this data. And as you'll see a theme building off of last week's presentation, that, we see significantly increased data reporting, which, I count as a success, a great success. It's a little bit hard to swallow as a success to say that increased incidences of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment is a success. At the same time, we think it much more accurately represents the experience that our students have been communicating about that they've had to us, both through firsthand accounts, through a variety of mediums over the past few years, and as well as our student climate surveys over time. But we recognize the very real, now that we have the data, all of the very real data quality issues are right in front of us. And so we're eager now to be able to have the capacity to dig into those over time. So with that, we'll move into the data, and I'll call on Dr. Goodall when I get caught up with some of this at times. But this first graph just reflects a little bit of what I was just sharing. So this is kind of the broadest look of the number of incidences of bullying or harassment that have been recorded over time. So as you can see, the time frame is not super long, and this again reflects this being our first annual report, the first issuing of guidance in the fall of 2019 about how to record these through our Infinite Campus and student information system. So you see obviously a spike of those in 2020 as that guidance was issued, and those practices had begun. And certainly in 2021, we recognize the challenges of that year and why there were significantly fewer. But then in this current year, we see this additional increase that, we think, again, is due to some of this implementation and awareness raising, in addition to the other school culture issues that we experienced over time. This next slide shows the same overtime, the general overtime by grade span. So obviously, you can see—
Assistant Superintendent Townsend.
Sorry.
We have a question from Board Member Burke.
Yep. Yeah, just a clarifying question. When I'm looking at these graphs, just take 2021, for example, because it's easy math. Does it mean there was 20 total allegations and 16 of them were substantiated?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, and that'll be a consistent pattern that you see throughout the data. So, obviously the main conclusion here is you see this significant number of incidences reported at the middle school level. And so again, while we think this does reflect, the real experience of middle school students, we also anticipate that as we grow our practices, particularly at the secondary school level, we may see this balance out over time. Now, as we take a look at, what was the basis for the allegation? So that was generally just the total number of bullying and harassment claims over time. This begins to help us parse out, what protected class it was based on. So in this graph, you'll see that none of the above is the largest of these categories. And none of the above essentially reflects the bullying, the allegations of bullying, in which it was not, at least based in our recording, based on one of the protected classes. So those categories on the side reflect allegations allegations or substantiated incidents of bullying that is not based on a protected class. From there, you can see that on the basis of race or national origin is the next highest category around which students experienced instances of harassment, followed by gender. When you break those out by school level, while you see overall some similar patterns, in particular just the significant numbers of just general bullying claims and allegations and incidents, you do see a bit of a difference between the middle schools and the high schools, in which at the middle school level, it is predominantly the next largest category is of race, harassment based on race and national origin, where at the high school level, there are more instances based on sex or gender, which would reflect incidents of, also may reflect incidents of sexual harassment, as we'll get into. Again, this is just a more refined, broken down look over time of the incidents at just at the middle schools based on the various protected categories. So this slide focuses on the trends at the middle school level, and you can see that all types of harassments that students experienced did increase in this past year, except for on the basis of disability. It was the only protected class in which we saw a decrease. When we look at the middle school, this slide shows the types of incidents by school over time. And as you can see, Lincoln had the most documented number of incidents, and that the majority were on the basis of race. This slide also illustrates some of the potential issues that we've talked about with our data, norming and growing consistency around our data and record keeping, as we know that in many cases we saw, significant numbers of discipline incidents related to Lincoln. So this data quality work will be an ongoing focus for us moving forward.
So just think there's a mistake in like says it excludes none of them.
Aaron, can you clarify the last thing you just said about data quality? I didn't fully understand that.
We just know from general discipline incidences that that Lincoln was using IC actively to in a different manner to record discipline incidences than the other schools. The other schools had other reporting tools for below suspension level offenses, including, Google Sheets and other tools. So Lincoln more consistently used Infinite Campus to record instances of student behavior, broadly speaking. Thus, when we pull the data from Infinite Campus, we see a greater proportion there. So while I believe the Lincoln data to be consistent and accurate, right? We believe if all incidents of student behavior were recorded consistently across all of our schools, we potentially would see increased numbers here, for both King and Lyman Moore.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So now just to shift briefly to the high schools and how the data played out at the high school level. So here again, as you see, the largest category here is that which is none of the above, which generally reflects allegations of bullying. But as we saw in the other graph, the most significant category following that is harassment based on sex or gender at the high school level, followed by the race or national origin and sexual orientation. But so when we look at that across the high schools, again, a little bit similar to how the middle school data played out, we see significant numbers of this data being recorded and captured at Deering High School, and fewer incidences across the other two high schools.
And is that also a data quality issue?
I think it's, and just practice in terms of norming, again, as we talked about, last week, and I think is consistent with this week is, now that we're able to see our data in these ways, that we had not yet really been able to see in this way, we know the challenge in front of us in terms of norming our practice around who enters what for when, how do we determine incidences? And it goes beyond just the specific data entry protocols, but also, the bullying and harassment incidents require a lot of kind of collaboration and assessment of like, is it, when do we consider something bullying, and do we have the same kind of general assessment of that? And so it's going to require not just the technical training around how to enter the information into IC. We'll be able to accomplish that and do some of the technical cleanup. But I think the deeper work ongoing is both how do we determine what's happening, right? And what our ultimately, most importantly, what our response is, right? And norming around that. So that is part of the focus, as we talked about last week with our secondary admin team, in particular, our assistant principals. The last graph the last of the kind of like summary data that we wanted to share was specifically around instances of sexual harassment. So again, what you see is significantly increased data reporting around incidences of sexual harassment. So again, while we do not want our students to ever experience any incidents of sexual harassment, again, we feel like this is consistent with what we've heard from the narrative around students. And so feel like some of these initial policy moves are helping us to get a line of sight into the data. As is captured in the comments, there's, some level of kind of wonkiness to the data entry process within IC that may lead folks to, kind of incorrectly label it in terms of none of the above. So these are issues that we're, continuing to work through now that we're able to pull the data and report on it this way. But broadly speaking, what we see in terms of the recording of these incidences of sexual harassment, is beginning to align with what we understand our student experience to be, so that we can kind of target our efforts to support them. So from here, my last slide on the summary data is around resolutions that were kind of linked to incidences of harassment, discrimination, or bullying. And so, again, we just have a few years of data here in terms of recording this over time. And what you see is kind of the primary resolution is what we grouped as lesser disciplinary actions. So this was a broad range of potential disciplinary outcomes, including such things as parent contact, teacher resolution, restorative conversations, and even just logging it for documentation purposes in an ongoing way. The next largest group of resolutions was in-school suspension related to instances of, either bullying, harassment, or discrimination. All right. So these were the resolutions that were associated with the substantiated incidences. So now I want to transition. This slide concludes the reporting on kind of all the incidents that were recorded by school sites related to harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment. And the following set of slides will share the data about the use of the anonymous reporting form and the number of complaints that we received and their outcomes.
Aaron, would this be a moment to pause and take questions on the first part of the presentation, or would you want to get through the whole presentation, because maybe you'll answer some of the questions that are going to come up?
I'm happy to pause. Let's pause and just answer questions, and then we can move forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
And if it's something I will answer, I'll just note that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Ms. Lenz.
I have two questions, and they're kind of interrelated, which is if an incident happens that affects more than one protected class of a person, who decides which category it falls into? What is the process like for that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the work that we need to norm. So it's, the assistant principal nominally, right, generally is the one inputting that, would be the short answer to that.
And does the student have a say into which?
No, not generally speaking. And again, that's a distinction we'll make as we look at this other data where it is kind of like self-reported, their identity. So in the anonymous reporting form, for example, as we'll see, we have some breakdown on how the reporters, the people who use that form, reported either, how they identified from a racial perspective or from a sexual orientation perspective.
Thank you.
Mr. Grant.
we're going to come back here in a year from now and look at new data. Do you have confidence that we'll have normalized across the schools so that we have a real cross section to look at?
Yes, significant. I mean, yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's because why?
Because I think we've been able to then mine the data to see the issues. I mean, really, this is this level of visualization and pulling together all the different, and this goes back to not just this data, but to last meetings on the discipline data to see the all of the various kind of categories and codes and the ways that it's showing up and kind of problematizing kind of our reporting and tracking of this data. So from that perspective, kind of we have insight into what it looks like in a way that we have yet to have, and just our focus and kind of intention around the routines that we'll have this year with our administrators, work that's begun already in terms of conversations around how do we manage this. And that's closely related to the ongoing work of the implementation of our strategies to not just the data perspective, right? But all in, that's both the strategies we're executing to ensure we're trying to reduce the numbers of these incidences.
So you feel confident that people will be trained up quickly enough to get this?
Yeah, I think, it's
starting consistently.
I'm not going to say that it'll be perfect by next year.
Confident.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to be perfect by next year. But I think the trajectory that we're on in terms of data capacity and quality is significant, and that's the next step for us.
Thank you.
Ms. Brodin.
Thank you, Chair. As a follow-up to Board Member Lentz's question, I'm curious if Infinite Campus allows, or if it could be set up to allow a multi-select feature, so somebody could choose two things.
Gavin, can you go to the mic, please? Because people at home cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. It is not currently set up to choose more than one type of harassment. I should have say that it can't be, but the way that we report to the state, they only ask us for one. And so it would get, how do we decide which one is primary or secondary? I'm not sure that it's built for that, but currently it's not set up that way. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Brodin. Ms. Dew.
I was just wondering where would misgendering or use of preferred pronouns be in this?
Great question. And that's one, that particularly in the subsequent slides, that is a bit of a challenge. Generally, that was included based on, harassment on the basis of sex or gender, is generally how we categorize those.
Thank you, Ms. Dew. Ms. Bondo.
Thank you. I have two questions. I try to understand the way between the board is being see those data, and so I try just to see how we are ensuring then the different schools are using those data behavior, the way to analyze exactly what's going on and to make a change. How can we ensure that they're really using that one properly? Or we just having the data for the board, and then they're just using the Infinity Campus to enter the information, and nobody's using it. Because when I look at the middle school, the way we have the bullying and harassment high, so I look at the transition between the middle school to the high school. So I wonder myself how well those behavior data are being used to the leader of the school, so they can start analyzing that and start making change. So how can we ensure that it's happening that way?
Yep. I would say, that is one of our district, part of our safe and equitable schools district priority is around, the implementation of what we refer to as multi-tiered systems of support. And at the core of that practice is having data that they're looking at regularly to identify issues, be able to respond to them. I'll say, we're continue to grow in that practice, but, we can, that's one of the things that is part of, we use related to that to kind of assess schools' progress. We use an instrument called the Tiered Fidelity Inventory to assess, how well they are doing in implementation of some of those practices, and data. Having a team that looks at data is one of the core elements of that. So potentially at future, kind of updates as it relates to the implementation of our strategies related not just to bullying and harassment, but to the school climate and culture overall. We could include those updates on how schools are scoring on that.
Yeah, I will have to, because I would like to understand the process of evaluating the implementation of those policies for different high schools and different schools. So if we can have some breakdown on the use of those reporting system, on the behavior and or the suspension rated as well. So I would like to have a follow-up of that.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't see any other board questions. I'll just mention to the board that I was on the subcommittee that developed the policy and worked on the procedure. And the community groups that were at the table working on the policy at the time were very clear that if we were successful, we would see we should expect a big increase in the incidents that are coming to our attention. So I want to make sure that when board members are looking over time, that we're not thinking that that cases are necessarily increasing, but that we are that they're being reported and that we're starting to address them much more so than we had in the past. Ms. Lenz.
Just one follow-up on that is I'm curious what mechanisms are in place to let students know about how to report. Like, how did the students know what to do?
I mean, I think that's an area of growth, and certainly would invite any of our student board members, that I know that there was some engagement, and Maggie, you can weigh in on this, here at Casco through some of this work, but that, we weren't as consistent around the student level rollout as we want to be. And that's one of the areas of focus for this coming year.
Thank you.
But that also is a transition to the anonymous reporting, because that's where the bulk of those reports
That's true.
Came from.
Thank you very much. Yes.
One second.
Before we go.
I don't know how closely this relates to what he just said, but I do know that at some point this year, we did have a teacher at Portland express their wish to encourage kids to report this stuff more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we'll see. So I thank you, Abdullah, because you'll see in the data, and I know there was a strong kind of staff refresher at Portland High in the fall, and that led to a significant uptick in the use of the anonymous reporting form into reports made directly to the district ombudsperson from Portland High. So we'll see in the data as it comes that Portland High is heavily represented. And again, to the same point I've made about some of these other ones, that tracked pretty closely with the implementation of that step. So I see that as a positive thing, just as you're saying that folks encouraging to step up and report to allow us to begin to lean into those issues.
I had one last question. I noticed on the new website, right on the homepage, one of the 10 icons at the bottom was make a complaint. And is that taking us to our?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we have had it in our existing website. The best place while we were in this transition was one of the kind of rotating tiles takes you to the Student Speak Up website. So, if you happen to hit there just the right time, you'll see it. So not ideal, but yes, we've collaborated with Grace and it's been on that team's radar to have that central in the new website rollout.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to transition to a couple of slides related to kind of the anonymous reporting tool and just reporting back how that was used and what we saw come through that over our first year of implementation. So, so this is kind of housed through our Student Speak Up website. And this slide reflects the content of what was reported to us through that site. So overall, there were 33 submissions, 33 unique submissions on the anonymous reporting form in this past year. And as you can see, they covered a range of issues related to harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment. And these issues, indicate here were primarily incidents that were happening on campus, though not exclusively. So it really, I think, in many ways accomplished what we wanted to, was a vehicle for people to speak up and report incidents in a variety of ways. And again, not all of them related ultimately to harassment, discrimination, or sexual harassment, but it was another vehicle for people to bring forward concerns. This next slide gives us some information about who was using the form to report incidents. So if you've seen the form, but the form, it's all self-identified. And ultimately at the end, it's anonymous. And at the end, somebody can leave their name or email address if they want contact or follow-up. But that's an optional piece. And generally the vast majority did not, as it was intended to be anonymous. But here, in terms of self-identification, you can see that primarily that this data is from either the victims of the inappropriate conduct or adult advocates of these victims. So there were a number of instances where adults were filling out the form on behalf of students, and that the demographic information, as I said, is self-reported. And as you can see, there was a broad range of students who were using it, both from a perspective of race and ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation. As well, there was fairly widespread, including almost all of our secondary schools, use of the anonymous reporting tool. And as you see, the primary were at the high school and middle level, with a number of adult reporters also weighing in to provide reports to us. So that this kind of encompasses, who was using and taking advantage of our anonymous reporting tool. This final data slide is about the number of complaints that were reported to the district ombudsperson during this past year. So some of these may also be reflected in the overarching data that we saw, but some of them may not be, particularly if there were incidents of harassment or discrimination or sexual harassment related to incidents between adults and students that would not have been captured in the same way within our Infinite Campus system. So overall, there were 56 complaints or reports reported to the ombudsperson, more than half of which we categorized as some form of harassment. Again, this gets back to our issues of really, once the issues are unpacked, landing on consistent classifications. These reports came from numerous schools during the year, but most heavily from our secondary schools. Depending on the nature of the complaint, these were investigated either by site administrators, our district ombudsperson themselves, also potentially our employee relations director who handled some of the employee investigations, or at times we had our outside counsel from Drummond support us in a couple of investigations. And as you can see, approximately 2/3 of these cases were substantiated. So 39 out of the 56 total. So this concludes our first ever kind of data report to the board regarding the incidence of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment experienced by students in our district. So I'd like to end our presentation this evening in a moment with sharing a few of our reflections and next steps as we work to honor the commitments outlined in the policy to our students. So the first major reflection after this first year of implementation is that we saw, these increased numbers of reporting, as Chair Figdor mentioned, and as I indicated, we do see that as an initial sign of success. So while, we have significantly increased data reporting to a level that more closely corresponds to what students have described as their experiences through their first-hand accounts in various school climate surveys. The variability you see in this data is in part attributed to some of the implementation steps that were accomplished. For example, as I referenced, Portland High School's team led a strong staff refresher on the policy last fall, and subsequently we saw an increase in reports to the ombudsperson and use of the anonymous reporting form. However, as discussed, with our discipline data last meeting, and as we've discussed this evening, this leads to our priority for this coming year to improving our data quality through the meeting routines and collaboration we'll have with our secondary administrators. The second major reflection coming out of this first year of implementation is around the role of the position to support the implementation of this policy. I want to recognize and thank Kate Brogan for serving in this role in its first year. It is a challenging body of work undertaken during an incredibly challenging time. And we thank her for her efforts to help launch this and grow a culture that is safe and welcoming for all of our students. Over this first year, one of our primary learnings was around the time allocation related to this role. We had envisioned this role that would spend roughly half their time thinking about the prevention and education work and half their time managing and following up on the response to incidents of behavior, harassment and discrimination. However, as we saw, and as we were cautioned, and so even more, it became paramount to us and clear that this role needs to focus not exclusively, but nearly so on how we respond when students come forward and share very personal experiences with us. It's of the utmost importance for us to be able to respond in consistent, trauma-informed, and timely ways to continue to build trust with students, staff, and the community, and to begin to repair that harm. And inappropriate handling of those complaints only exacerbates the issues that the students may have faced. So we have revised the job description for this policy to focus more exclusively on the investigations, both in leading them and in supporting our school administrators in the execution of those as a focus, and upped our expectations in terms of the experience somebody is going to bring forward into that work. So we have also realized as we moved forward and got feedback over the course of the year that given those changes, in the field generally, it doesn't conform to how an ombudsperson may serve the community and other organizations. And so we have retitled it, as the student equity officer, and will be the district's Title IX coordinator. So this position is posted, and we'd had, under the old job description, we'd had an initial round of interviews this summer, and we look forward to hiring an important member of our team to help us in this second year of the work. The next area of reflection, is related, to both of the prior ones, and that's around improving our communication and coordination among the new student equity officer, our school level liaisons, and the school leaders, so that we're able to respond in these timely and consistent ways when people are brave enough to come forward. This will entail additional training with our administrators about the complaint procedures, continuing to support the role of the school level liaisons, and developing improved processes and documentation to manage the case flow and the numbers that we, are experiencing so that we can respond effectively. The final kind of primary area of reflection is to more effectively integrate these prevention efforts with our other equity, literacy, and safe and equitable schools work. So these issues of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment are not isolated issues, but clearly integrated deeply with our ongoing work to create school climates that are safe and welcoming for all. So we must address this work holistically. A priority in that area for us this year will be our student engagement. We have done the policy rollout with secondary staff, but our student rollout has been inconsistent. We'll be working this year to make students more aware of their right to an environment free of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment, and know how to access the reporting options and seek support. So we'll partner with student leaders and student organizations in our schools in this effort. So finally, in closing, we expect that these next steps will deepen our implementation of this policy, and it will lead to improvements in our overall measures around school safety and students' sense of connection and belonging in our schools. We look forward to the next annual report to share improved data and the progress of these next steps. Thank you, and this concludes our report for this evening.
Thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent Townsend. What questions do I have? I see Board Member Burke. We'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. And it is, I don't know, it's things to see at this point, having been part of the policy creation. One thing I'm wondering at the root was understanding not only how obtuse the process was and thus why it wasn't being engaged, but also, as you were highlighting, what the experience was of students, whether it furthered harm or at least did no harm. And I'm just curious if you have any collection of information from those that did go through the process, if it was at least neutral to them, or if there's things that need to be improved because it wasn't where we would hoped it would be yet, that sort of thing.
Well, I'll say we didn't have a systematic process to collect feedback on their experience with the, with our complaint handling if they did come forward. That's something potentially for us to consider, as though almost a version of an exit interview, I guess, potentially. But so I would only rely on anecdotal data, and that's limited at that. And I would say the ones that are stickiest for me are the ones where we didn't execute in the ways that we wanted to. Certainly we experienced some transition. So I don't think we didn't, whatever analogy, we didn't bat 1,000, shoot 100%, whatever it is. But I do know that there were meaningful instances of intervention and support that happened, both between students and among adults and students. So we certainly have more work to go there. That's part of why that's a continued priority around that coordination, and ensure we're timely and we know who's doing what, so that we have consistent communication with families. So definitely areas for growth. But no, I can think of also a few really positive instances where we're able to, do the kind of harm repair work that we'd want to do.
Thank you. And perhaps you can say that you just answered that if I didn't understand correctly, but do we know that there was a cessation of the activities that were reported and substantiated? I know we saw the slide about what happened to the offender in terms of in school, out of school, that sort of thing. But was there actually a cessation of the activity afterwards?
So we do not have a specific data point to that. No, I didn't kind of respond to that specific question previously. And I think in the broader school level data, there were so many more incidents, right, that, schools were managing kind of on the daily. So it would be hard pressed to speak about that. I think of the ones that I'm familiar with that rose to the level of kind of complaint that we are aware of at the central office. I don't know of any instances, that of ongoing harassment following the intervention. But at the same time, those were deeper, more substantial, kind of investigations in large part. But I also don't want to speak, on behalf of the victim in that case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Burke. And I'll just add, if it's all right, for me, seeing this data doesn't sting, because for me, it's we know these behaviors are happening, and they're coming out into the public and being acknowledged and addressed as a step towards changing the culture and behavior and creating safe schools where kids feel that they belong. So just to articulate again that I think the fact that, we know these incidents are happening, and so having them reported and complaints made is a step towards redressing the harm and moving to develop a culture where those behaviors are not just in the groundwater and what students are having to swallow each and every day. I'm going to go to Board Member Russell Better and then to Ms. Bondo. Board Member Russell Better, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Assistant Superintendent, I just had a couple of questions. One was from a while back when you mentioned in the slide just who was making the report. And I think you said adult advocate was maybe how you titled the adult ones. So I'm just curious, does that mean both staff and maybe parents or family members, or is that really just people in the building?
I would say, and I'm doing this a little bit by memory, there were a number of instances of potentially the school level liaison, supporting a student to fill out the report or filling it out with them. I know that there was instances of school social workers as well, helping students access the form or filling it out on their behalf. So I think primarily it was school staff that were supporting students and reporting these incidents. But I can think of at least one that, seemed to be, again, we only have the information they choose to put in the form, so limited, but seemed to be not a staff person, but an adult, filling out the form, talking about experiences that their child had had.
Okay, and then sort of in relation to that, I just wanted, I know, I believe Ms. Bondo, I think someone mentioned something about the website, and I can't recall the details, so sorry for that. But my question about the website was just, is there a plan to maybe in different spots have opportunities for whether it is a student to find the process or family members? Or were you hoping that was just going to be in one, the student speak out piece that comes up, you said, and kind of that first page, right?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, so clarify, please, if I don't answer it. I mean, our intent and aspiration is to make it simple. So we are looking to have kind of like a consistent, you know, easily accessible way for anybody to kind of report. So at this time, we're not intending to have different forms kind of tagged to different, you know, stakeholder groups, I guess, you know, if that's what you're referring to in terms of parents or families and students.
I think I was just trying to, I didn't ask very clearly, but that was what I was getting to. I think I was just trying to picture in the new website setup, like where you were hoping it would be housed, just to like see where would people interface with it. That was, I guess, where I was trying to understand.
And I don't know if
Grace isn't here, but in multiple, you know, it is in multiple places, but I think one of the features of that, the 10 tiles that are frequently used, tiles that are on, you know, every page that you go to, is the student speak up, symbol is.
Okay.
Oh, Grace.
Thank you.
Here. Sorry.
It will show up in the tiles, the icon buttons. It says report a concern. So that will be in there. It will also live in the family page. So if you put down, it will also live in the student, but it's all going to the same place. But you can find it in multiple areas.
Thank you. That was what I was hoping, Dr. Valenzuela, was just to be able to access it. So thank you. That answers my question. And then one other piece, Assistant Superintendent Townsend, was just when you were mentioning, looking at the data, that looked like about 2/3 of these cases were substantiated. And I'm just curious, in the cases that aren't considered substantiated or unsubstantiated, that's the conclusion, that like just how is the follow-up kind of with, I'm just trying to understand kind of what's the follow-up students get. Curious about kind of the consistency of the follow-up, both in the and across our buildings, just what the follow-up would look like, and then just for students to kind of get that information as you know, just maybe a picture of what that looks like would be helpful.
Sure. And I should, you know, provide a little more clarification on what unsubstantiated might mean.
Yeah.
So unsubstantiated doesn't necessarily mean that the allegation was determined to not be credible. In many cases, either because the reporting party declined to pursue it, or, you know, inability to kind of do appropriate, you know, additional follow-up and investigation. We just weren't able to substantiate the allegation. So that was a number of those. So it wasn't so much that we weren't able to, you know, that we found them to be untrue per se, right? But either because the reporting party elected not to want to pursue a formal investigation, or for some of those other reasons around the investigations, we weren't able to substantiate. So in those cases, obviously, you know, that was part of the dialogue, you know, with the reporters at that time, you know, that they wanted us to be aware of it, but they didn't want to be associated, you know, with the investigation, obviously, or not obviously, often that was because of their requests to remain anonymous. And so it was a concern they wanted us to be aware of. But there are a handful of incidents where then the students wanted to remain anonymous, and that limited at times our ability. So certainly not in all cases, but limited at times our ability to kind of fully investigate and kind of reach a formal conclusion around it. So that's some of that, you know, and certainly, you know, I think this is, you know, I think we continue to get stronger at the ongoing intake of reports, and the follow through and the final communication. That's really, you know, what seals the deal. And that, you know, I think we've improved, but also continues to be an area of growth of the final documentation. You know, the formal reports require a formal letter. So when there's a formal complaint, we do have a, you know, process to produce a formal report to, you know, both the reporting party as well as to the respondent in those cases. But ensuring we do those in a timely manner in a trauma-informed way, you know, we're continuing to improve our practice.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just wondering, the last piece is just, would the hope or maybe the intent be that follow-up, maybe say it was with the social worker that assisted the student? Would, you know, do you think the goal would include to have that adult, you know, kind of have that follow-up piece.
I
to
mean,
kind of
potentially,
process it.
depending on the context of the case and their
Yeah.
interests. I mean, the goal is to be able to, be in dialogue with, particularly the the victim, throughout the process to ensure their support's available and that they have access to them at any point throughout, from the moment they come forward throughout the process of investigation, through the resolution. So, but if it's appropriate for an adult advocate, be it parent, social worker, some other party to be involved in kind of the final resolution, then we would include them as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Russell-Better. Ms. Bondo.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple questions, 2 or 3 questions here. And I think the one is more relevant is on the reflection and next steps. And I just want to emphasize some on the increased administration training on complaint handling and investigation, because when I went back again to the slide of the different high school, harassment, bullying, harassment, Concord High School. So I see Casco Bay and I see Portland High School and I see the way they're reporting. It's not that they're not really doubting Portland High School and Casco Bay are reporting, but I just want to make sure then the policies that we have made in place really are shared between the administrator and the teachers, because that's the only way the student can be aware about what's going on. So I just wonder how many administrators and teachers, especially teachers, are aware about the policies and how we are holding our educator accountable for really what's happening. So I want to see for the next, if we can emphasize that.
Yes. Yep.
And the other one is that on the, do we have any feedback? I mean, when we have investigation, I mean, we need to be reporting. I mean, incident must be reported. So that means, do we have after investigation the result, and we get after investigation, we have the healing process for the victims. Do we have any feedback after those results from our students, or we just keep anonymous?
Yeah, we have not instituted any processes at this time for kind of post-incident, post-resolution, kind of gathering that kind of feedback. So we've, certainly been focused on the launch and the initial handling, but that's certainly something we could consider as we grow our capacity over time.
So why I'm so insisting on the high school, because when I look at the middle school reporting and incident, I mean, those are the students that are moving to the high school level. So that means the reporting system should be well implemented on the high school level. So those students, so we can start analyzing those data behavior and make sure that we're applying some change so the student can be well valued. So this is something that's really close to my heart, and I'm going to follow this one really closely.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bondo. There are other questions from the board. Mr. Youssef, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just quick question about the school level license and their visibility. Do they have offices and students are be able to go?
Right. I mean, they certainly have access to kind of confidential spaces. It's a range. I mean, it has been both, I'm kind of, thinking through the roster of them in my head. A number of them are social workers at our school sites, though not exclusively, or guidance counselors. So they have access to the offices, that they work from. We do have a handful who are also have been classroom teachers. And so certainly their classrooms at times can be appropriate, but they can also access, kind of confidential spaces if needed. So it's, we have a range of people, serving in that role. And that was kind of by design, not to just pigeonhole one group. And certainly there's, again, want to reinforce an expectation that a student can go to any adult that they trust to report an incident. So it's not like they have to go see the school level liaisons. We want to cultivate the expectation that any adult should be willing to kind of take an initial report, and their responsibility is to report that to the school level liaison and or the school administrator within 24 hours. Like, hey, a student told me this, so that that can be acted upon, and the student provided support. So yes, in terms of the roles and access to appropriate spaces for them to be able to have dialogue with students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Seeing no other questions from the board, I had one other question myself, which is, I know while we were passing this policy and revising our procedure, we were grappling with the fact that the Trump administration had weakened the rules, the Title IX rules. And so I'm wondering, and I know that we went above and beyond to do what we thought was necessary. And that's where we saw that Venn diagram of the different levels in the slides of the different levels of protection. And the board went above and beyond both what the federal government and the state requires in order to what we saw needed to better protect our students. But I'm just wondering if there have been any changes since the Biden administration came in, and if there's any, and I'm sorry, I'm not remembering that, but I know that I'm unclear about whether there were changes and whether it's caused us to look to see whether we needed to make any further changes to our policy.
Yep. So they have not, there are proposed changes. They have not been formally adopted yet. So, I do think there's a likelihood that in the next year, we'll need to come back to do some revisions to the Title IX processes. So again, in the procedure and potentially in the policy, if there are changes to the definitions, but in the procedure, there's a very specific Title IX, if something is considered a Title IX violation, very specific procedures that it lays out. And so, if those rules are changed and adopted, then yeah, we would come back with revisions around that. So, but that they've been proposed, but they have not been adopted.
Not been finalized. Okay, thank you. Anything else from the superintendent, from the assistant superintendent to close out this board focus?
Just quickly, again, you've seen that there's been a great deal of work done, and there's a clear understanding that more work needs to be done. And, even though it is hard to read, I do read this as progress in that, as Assistant Superintendent said, this reflects the experience that we hear from our students. And I just want to say that none of this would have been possible without the board's leadership in the development of this policy, as well as advocacy from the community, and most certainly without Assistant Superintendent Townsend's follow through and determination to see it through. This is hard work. It's been full of setbacks along the way, but I do believe that we're better positioned to make PPS a safe, welcoming, and inclusive setting because of his work on the implementation of this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And I will just say as well, it was really our students who brought this to us and were persistent in the need for us to act. And it took persistence before we did so. So I want to thank the courage and fortitude of the students who made this happen. And then also just to echo the superintendent's appreciation of Assistant Superintendent Townsend, who really shepherded this, the policy development, the procedure, and got us to where we are today. So thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent. I think this is real progress that we're making. So I'm deeply appreciative of that. And now we are on to old business, consideration and action to authorize the chair to sign an agreement with the Long Island and Great Diamond Island schools. Is there a motion? Board Member Burke, seconded by, help me out. Thank you, Ms. Lentz. Mr. Superintendent, would you like to speak to the motion?
As chair, since Long Island established its own schools, middle school students from the island have attended Portland Public Schools for grades 6 through 12. Students attend King Middle School and their selected high school. Long Island pays Portland Public Schools tuition for service to these students at the Maine Department of Education established tuition level. In 2018, a small number of Great Diamond Island students began attending Long Island School in lieu of attending mainland Portland schools. As you probably can take from this, PPS does not operate a school on Great Diamond Island. This arrangement was presented and approved by the boards of both districts. and the arrangement was well received by Great Diamond Island residents who prefer to have students travel the short distance to Long Island and enjoy the benefits of a small island school setting. Long Island has supported this arrangement because it bolsters their enrollment and students' experiences at its schools. PPS pays Long Island School District tuition for services to these students for FY23, so our current fiscal year. PPS will be responsible for the tuition for 7 students, which is a historic high. Additionally, after 3 years of holding tuition at the FY20 rate of $20,240, Long Island has indicated the need to return to using the Maine Department of Education established tuition, which is $22,828. So the proposed MOU reflects this change, and it's the only significant change in the agreement from what was approved by the board back in 2018. And so this agreement will run for a term of 5 school years, beginning retroactive to the beginning of July of 2022 through June of 2027.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, we're going to move to public comment. So this is public comment specifically on authorizing me as chair to sign an agreement with Long Island and Great Diamond Island Schools. If there are any members of the public who would like to comment, please either come forward if you're here at Casco Bay or use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands up. I'm going to give folks just another couple of seconds. And I'm going to close public comment and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we're going to, Board Member Burke.
I just want to say I want to acknowledge the importance of schools on our islands, and then I'm glad that we can facilitate this kind of arrangement to meet the needs of our students on the islands. They're vital to keeping community intact. And thank you for all the work that went in and getting us to this point.
Thank you, Board Member Burke. Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support authorizing me as chair to sign an agreement with the Long Island and Great Diamond Island Schools. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair, Ms. Bondo.
Yes.
Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Ms. Lentz.
Yes.
Mr. Grant.
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better.
Yes.
Ms. Billiou. I'm sorry, Ms. Bryden.
Yes.
Mr. Youssef.
Yes.
Ms. Ellis.
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili.
Yes.
Ms. Diu.
Yes.
And Chair Victor.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with our students voting with the majority. Now we're on to consideration and action to appoint Ben Grant to the Buildings for Our Future District Advisory Building Committee. Is there a motion? Ms. Bondo, seconded by Board Member Burke. Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this motion?
Yes, Chair. Very briefly, at the August 2nd meeting of the Board of Public Education, Board Chair Figder nominated Board Member Grant to serve on the District Advisory Building Committee, which is the Buildings for Our Future Governance Committee. Mr. Grant is nominated to replace Mr. Youssef, who had previously served as the DABC co-chair. So as part of this nomination, Chair Figdor will also assume the DABC co-chair role that was previously occupied by Mr. Youssef. As you know, the DABC advises the board on matters related to the renovations of our Buildings for Our Future bond. Later in tonight's agenda, you will see a first read of a matter that's being taken up by the DABC on Thursday of this week. We will also have a short workshop on that topic later tonight as well. In other words, the work of the DABC is critical and ongoing, so it will be great to get Mr. Grant to transition onto this work quickly if you grant your approval tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are there questions on the motion? I'm going to check Ms. Russell Better. Okay, I don't see any questions. Is there any public comment on the motion? So again, this is my appointment of Mr. Grant to serve on the district level building advisory committee. If you would like to address the board, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom or come forward. Don't see any public comment, just waiting another couple of seconds. Okay, I'm going to close public comment and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion? I'm not missing hands, right? No, I will just say I first want to also acknowledge that Ms. Russell Better also serves on the district level advisory committee. And I want to thank Mr. Youssef for stepping up and both serving on the committee and co-chairing it with Councillor Diane. Thank you so much. You did a great job. Really appreciate your leadership. And I thank Mr. Grant for being willing and interested and available to step into this role. As the superintendent has said, it is an important role as we work to finish the renovation of our 4 elementary schools. So thank you very much, Mr. Youssef, and thank you, Mr. Grant. I look forward to working with you on the committee. Okay, with that, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support my appointment of Mr. Grant to the Buildings for a Future District Advisory Building Committee.
Ms. Bondo?
Yes.
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Lentz?
Yes.
Mr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better?
Yes.
Ms. Bryden?
Yes.
Mr. Youssef?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Mr. Alzamili?
Yes.
Ms. Diu?
Yes.
And Chair Fig.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority. Next, we're on to new business. First read of authorization to approve the Portland Adult Education academic year calendar. Next is first read of authorization to transfer $227,805 from Presumpscot Elementary School's contingency funds and $178,990 from Reiki Elementary School's Buildings for Our Future renovation projects contingency funds for a total of $406,795 to the Longfellow Elementary School's Buildings for Our Future renovation projects contingency fund. And this is pending a recommendation from the District Advisory Building Committee. And as the superintendent said, that might have sounded confusing and like a lot of numbers. And we're going to hold a short workshop after the conclusion of our business meeting on this issue. And then our final first read for the evening is first read of a request for proposals to contract with a search firm for the recruitment and selection of a new superintendent. And so that is it for our business meeting for tonight. We are about to adjourn, and then we're going to move into 3 workshops. The first workshop is on high school choice. The second workshop is our plan for our superintendent search. And our third workshop is on the Buildings for Our Future issue that we've just tackled or just briefly talked about. So with that, I'll also remind the board and the public that our next meeting, our next business meeting of the Portland School Board is on September 6th at 6 p.m. And we will meet as we have been for quite some time now in a blended format here at Casco Bay and with members of the public joining us, able to join us either here at Casco Bay or on Zoom. So with that, we are ready to adjourn. Is there a motion? Board Member Burke, is there a second? Ms. Bryden, just with a show of hands, please indicate. Okay, it's unanimous. We are adjourned at 8:40 p.m.